Hola clase, hoy vamos a aprender el tiempo condicional, the conditional tense. So the conditional tense, just like the name says, it's based on a condition, and the condition is a hypothetical situation. And that is what we're going to learn today, is how to express those hypothetical expressions. I would do this, I would do that. So let's go ahead and get started. So first, we're going to learn the mechanics of how to conjugate that conditional tense. In English, you have would and then add the verb. So for example, I would purchase a house. I would travel the world, right? So you just put would and then whatever action verb that you want to use. So instead, what we have is we have those endings. And you have those endings for the conditional on the screen right now. And those would be ia, ias, ia, íamos, iais, ian. Vosotros we don't use, but you know, I have it right there for you just in case. That way you can recognize it if you see it. Since in Spanish we don't have an auxiliary verb like would, what we're going to do is we're just going to add those endings to our verb. So for example, I would read, yo leería. Tú leerías. Usted, él, ella leería. Nosotros leeríamos. Vosotros leeríais y ellos leerían. So pretty standard. You just add those endings. Now, take a look at what you have on the screen. And I highlighted the endings in red, and the stem I put in yellow. Now, take a look at the yellow part. What are we attaching the endings to? So if you take a look at the stems, hopefully you realize that we're attaching the endings to the intact infinitive verb. So as you can see, if we just read the yellow font there, you're going to see that you have estudiar, cantar, beber, vivir, entender. We're not dropping the endings, the original endings of the infinitive. We are just adding the conditional on top of it. We're just tacking it on. And the other thing that I want you to take a look at is where are the accents? So hopefully you realize that the accents are on each one of them. Estudiaría, yo estudiaría, tú estudiarías, etc. Okay? Now, what about irregular verbs? Well, we have some that are that have an irregular stem. Those are going to remain an irregular stem. And the most common ones I'm giving you right here. There's 12 of them. Diría, harías, podría, pondría, habríamos, cabría, querrían, sabría, saldría, valdría, vendrías, podría. Learn these 12 because even native speakers, they make some mistakes with some of these. So for example, for the verb querer, it should be querrían. And you might hear some native speakers say querrían, and that is not correct. It's querrían. So you're gonna find some of these that you might wonder because you might have heard them differently. These are the correct ones. So make sure that you commit them to memory, and that's gonna make your writing a lot easier. So now that we know how to practice, how to conjugate the conditional, let's practice. Let's go back to our original example. ¿Qué pasa si te ganas el gordo de la lotería? El gordo de la lotería, that means the biggest prize, right? The big fish. ¿Qué harías? What would you do? Hypothetical situation. Let's assume that it is $300 million. And let's assume that you have to spend them this year. Yeah, you cannot save. What would you do? ¿Qué harías? ¿Qué harías? So I'll tell you what I would do. Yo compraría una casa grande para mi familia, compraría muchas casas para mis primos, pagaría la escuela o la universidad para mis hijas y todos mis sobrinos, viajaría por todo el mundo, donaría el dinero para algunas organizaciones que me gustaría promover, y compraría mucha ropa y mucho maquillaje, unos buenos autos, y yo creo que eso sería todo lo que podría hacer. I'm going to follow up with a question. ¿Dejarías de trabajar? Would you stop working? So think about that. Okay, so go ahead and answer those two questions using the conditional tense. Okay, now remember what I said. Yo compraría una casa, viajaría el mundo, and so on. So go ahead and answer that question. All right. What about your best friend? Let's conjugate it now for he or she. ¿Qué haría tu mejor amiga si ganara la lotería? And I put in here, mi mejor amiga iría de compras a Italia, me llevaría a mí y nos divertiríamos mucho. We would go shopping, we would have fun. So go ahead and tell me, ¿qué haría tu mejor amiga? Okay, so number one, we said that the conditional tense is used to speak about a hypothetical situation. What would happen, or what would you do in a certain situation? There's another use for the conditional, and that is when we're situating ourselves in the past and we are expressing something that was going to happen in the future. But remember, our perspective is the past. So that future that we're referring to already passed. An example would be el contratista. Let's say that we have a contractor that was supposed to remodel our kitchen. El contratista dijo, the contractor said, and that's in the past, that he would finish remodeling the kitchen in a week. But then something didn't happen, right? This actually happened to me. The contractor, took maybe 2 months to complete remodeling. So anyways, and these type of sentences you're going to recognize, because it's going to say something like somebody said, somebody committed to, and that he would have done this, that he would do this, or that she would do that, and so on. Now, here's another situation where you're going to use the conditional, and that is courtesy, or as a way to request for things in a more polite way. You're going to use the conditional. So let's assume that you're in a very fancy restaurant, whereas, in another restaurant you would have said, quiero agua. In this fancy restaurant, to sound more polite, you would say, me gustaría tomar un vaso de agua. When you're ordering your food, me gustaría el jamón ibérico. A mi hija le gustaría ordenar los huevos con caviar, and so on. Y nos traería una botella de vino. So all of those in the conditional. So politeness. And there's another use for the conditional, and that is wondering what happened in the past. So, for example, if I ask the question, ¿qué hora sería cuando llegó Papá Noel? I wonder what time it was when Santa Claus came. Serían las 2 o 3 de la mañana, me imagino. I imagine it was 2 or 3 in the morning. But I use the conditional. Serían las 2 o 3 de la mañana. Now, So we've seen all of the uses of the conditional, and I'm gonna share something that we use the conditional in English for. However, in Spanish we don't. Okay, and an example would be every summer we would go visit grandma. So in English we use the conditional to talk about a habitual situation in the past, something that you used to do. However, in Spanish, we don't use the conditional for that. Do you remember what we used? So hopefully you said the imperfect tense. So what did you do as a child every summer? ¿Qué hacías en el verano cuando eras niña? En el verano íbamos, that's the imperfect, íbamos a visitar a mi abuela, nadábamos en el río, tocábamos canciones, hacíamos una fogata, and so on. So I'm using the imperfect tense rather than the conditional. Okay, that's it for the conditional. I'm going to ask you some questions from Inténtalo in your book, and that wraps it up for the conditional. I'm giving you some homework that for you to practice. And if you guys have any questions at all, let me know. Adios.